So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining the Donnerstag Dynamo Art Talks. It's a pleasure to have you here, and I'm very happy today because I must say the program, it's very diversified, and this actually has different disciplines all in contemporary art practice. But tonight I'm delighted to introduce you to Nelly Haliti. I will read you her biography, but I also, I'm just happy to have her here. I will read you her biography, but I also, I'm just happy to have her here. Voila, this one, voila. I run out of battery already. So, sound. Probando uno. Yeah, good. So, my name is Anne Brand-Galvez. Thank you for joining the Textile Bergbereich on Thursdays. This is our third edition of a 13 editions program. The aim of the Art Talks is to generate dialogues and perspectives in contemporary practices. And I want to thank very much to the Dynamo Technic support, because without them this talk not be possible. Please write your questions after the talk. We have a forum discussion. This talk is live streaming on YouTube and retransmitted in Guatemala City at Manifesto Space on Tuesdays. And I introduce you with great pleasure to Nelly. Nelly Haliti was born in Ballet. She has Bulgarian origins. She studied at the Geneva University from Art and Design from 2007 till 2012 and graduated from the Master in Fine Arts in Visual Arts. She received the prize New Ahead BNP for her diploma work and the award of Fonds d'Art Contemporain de la Ville de Genève. During the last 5 years, she has been living between Paris, Roma, and Geneva. Her work has been supported by numerous Swiss institutions and foundations like Pro Helvetia, la Ville de Genève, le Canton de Genève, État du Valais, and institutions like Fri-Art, Centre Culturel de Genève, Kunsthalle St. Gallen, and le Centre Culturel Suisse de Paris. She was resident in Quito and Lima for a project led by the curator Harm Lux. She also residing in Paris at the Le Corbusier building in the Fondation Suisse. And she was residing as well at the Swiss Institute in Rome, where she produced a film project on the site of Villa Adriana, a series of paintings presented at the Kunsthalle St. Gallen, and a performance project in collaboration with Leo Hoffmann about historical exhibition Contemporain. At the Palais de l'Athénée in Geneva, she had a solo show where she presented the Time Machine. In this project, she elaborated the first version of Un Chant d'Amour, which is the installation that won the Swiss Art Award in Basel this year. Her practice involves various mediums, and the ones I mentioned here are going to be shown in her presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Hello. Thank you, Anne, for this invitation. I'm really not used to microphones, so you have to tell me when it does not function. So Anne and I, we met 10 years ago in the Art Academy in Geneva, and I'm very happy to present my work here tonight because the last 5 years we did not have the chance to see each other. And so I think even she is going to discover some of the works. She asked me a series of questions, and I think we will start with the first question was how do I start artistic work, and therefore I wanted to show you some of my projects since I finished the art academy. Is it working? Voila. So this first project here, when I voilà, this first project is a series of painting that is called Pyramid Sunlight, and it's based with 77 paintings made of oil, and that are constructing together a pyramid, like a tower, like a castle of cards. And Anne asked me how do I start an artistic work. And for me the question is very difficult, because somehow I feel I start with an intention, a desire, more than an idea, and then I will choose the medium that will that will hold the best the idea. Here we have HDMI connection troubles. Voila. So this is one work. Then a second one. The two subjects with which I work are repetition, and usually I used to have a series of paintings like that. And this is the base of my work, let's say, mostly oil painting, small canvas. And this is a series presented in Rome. I don't know if you can read down the information, or is it too small? Should I get it a little bit bigger, like this? Voilà. And then this is the work, also the second part of this sequence. It's mainly series that will reflect the idea of repetition. The repetition for me is very important because it has something to do with everyday life. It's at the same time fascinating and very annoying, because you start something and by repeating you can make it better or you can make it worse. And so in this series of paintings, as well as the lemons, I feel something is developing on each canvas. And so I will never show one single painting. I always try to combine a series. Then this is a work in Paris. So here you can see the three different families, let's say, of works, passing from something very figurative to something very abstract. Here in that building, it was important for me to work with colors, because it's an architecture by Le Corbusier, and this space has a very large wall painting by Le Corbusier behind. I don't know if you ever been to the Swiss Foundation in Paris, but it's very massive, and I wanted to hide it and just work with the chart colors. So voilà. This is a project in La Rada, and La Rada is one of my favorite art space in Locarno, maybe the only one that is showing works by young artists. And this was curated by Sebastian Peter and Riccardo Lisi, who gave me the entire room. Here it's 12 meters long, so you have a lot of paintings. And as you can see, each family of painting has another language. Either it will be only abstract, or with some lines, or with some figurative elements. Here the second keyword I would like to bring to this presentation is the question of time. First repetition, and second time. It can be very easy to use this notion for an artistic work, because it is inside of most of the artworks. But here I wanted to create arrows that are made out of ceramics, and the idea of time is referred to the metaphor of Zenon, that says that time never reaches the goal, it's fragmented. And here these arrows are made to be broken, because they are made of ceramics. When I hold them, when I use them, they will broke when they reach the goal, or even before, because they are very heavy. And so the work is presented like this in a performance. And another work that brings the question of time are these sun clocks that are presented generally also in a family. And it's about a broken time that does not pass the same way as in a linear way, let's say. And it has stones inside that will interrupt the time, or even no communication between two time spaces, two stones inside that will interrupt the time, or even no communication between two time spaces. This work can be also displayed like this, because one of the things that is important also for me is the question of inaccessibility. So this installation is in a house, in a art space called La Villa Bernasconi in Geneva, and it's made of 700 kilograms of sand that will be presented like a sort of a wave of a beach of sand. And the idea here is to create an inaccessible space in the exhibition. This idea of inaccessibility comes again in the last image that you will see from the Swiss Art Awards. Then here I wanted to show you one. Anne asked me which are the most important works for me, and I would like to present maybe 3 video works. So this is a project called Free Moments, and it is presented in the Centre d'Art Culturel Centre d'Art Contemporain in Geneva. And this is my first project with 16 millimeter. Here I took the found footage from an engineer who got his boat and left Geneva with the boat for 16 years. And the video is displayed on a 2-channel screen. Geneva with the boat for 16 years. And here the video is displayed on a 2-channel. And I would like to show you basically 3 video works. And this is the first one. And I would like to show you basically 3 video works. No, it's not that one. that was presented like this in the Centre d'Art Contemporain in Geneva. So it's a double channel that was turning around. And having also this geodesic structure in the middle allowed us to organize events inside of the exhibition space. So sometimes it was just running like this with the two videos and another one projected on the top of it. And sometimes it was as a social space transformed for performances and concert and lectures. Here the video. That's the second project, the second video project I wanted to present to you. It's basically it's in the Centre Culturel Suisse in Paris. This is the first video I made in Bulgaria with 16mm camera, and it's from 2014. The place I went to film is the former Communist Party that is in the center of the country. It's an old building that was made in the late 70s and that simply got destroyed because the concrete was too heavy, and also because of the state abandoned the building. And so I'm gonna show you the second work. This time it's not found footage, but it's material that we shot it together with a director of photography and cinematographer who is not there tonight, but he's called Domingo. And this second video, I'm gonna show you this second video here. Excuse me, it's a bit difficult to navigate. Where is it? It's this one.
Okay, Lindsay. Okay.
No.
I'll come with you.
It's
Okay.
presented like this in the Centre Culturel Suisse. So again, you have the double channel light screen. Sorry. Here it's presented differently because the two images are passing from one screen to the other, and here you have 5 screens that are turning around constantly. The idea is to reflect on the fact that the images are disappearing. So again, this idea of inaccessibility comes back in this work, and also of repetition, because the video is set on a loop, and you will see always the same images repeating. What is interesting is that on one side you have only path inside of the building, and on the other side you have the same path from the outside. So once you're included in the history, on the other side you're excluded. The thing that was really interesting for me was these mosaics inside of the building that are traditionally refer to the Byzantine history, and from the outside you can see it's like brutalist building, very heavy. And the more the video goes on, the more the building disappears. And so this is a 12-minute video project, and it's presented without sound. So the best is to see it in the space, not on video like this. And this was presented in 2016. At the same time, there was the exhibition of Mediengroup Bitnik, who are from Zurich, and we spoke a lot about the presentation and how to install. So it was very interesting to have on one hand the project of Mediengroup Bitnik, and on the other hand this installation. So you can see the installation. And so the third work I wanted to present you is called Un Chant d'Amour. This is a reference to the movie by Jean Genet, which is very important for me because it talks about prisons and distance, and again this idea of inaccessibility of the language, the impossibility to talk and to escape. And here it's in Geneva, in a space called Le Palais de l'Athénée. The idea was to build a transparent wall that will give the impression to the public that you can see between the two spaces, but you cannot pass. So everybody had to turn around and arrive in the other room. So you can see it both. And here is the same installation, the same wall in the Swiss Art Awards exhibition. Here it's different because the entire space is blocked and you can only see a landscape with something down here that is like a light. And the idea here is really that the public cannot see the space behind. Some people tried to look over, but it was kind of impossible. Voilà. So Anne asked me, how is it to get the Swiss Art Awards? And she invited me with this question. Here I put it an image from Marina Abramovic and her mother. And I tried also to, I wanted also to speak about references, because this is a question that comes very often also from my friends that are asking me whether the most important artist for me. So here I'm gonna make it very short. Recently I wanted to give more attention to modernist painters, and it became very important for me because they kind of had a direct link with painting without having a conceptual work behind. And also I gave attention to models, let's say. So for Marina Abramovic, I will say that some aspects in her work are very interesting, like dealing with pain, resistance, the limit of the body. And also I discovered recently that all her references are into spirituality. They are not from the artistic field. So for me it was interesting to see that she has monks as friends. She goes in to visit aborigines, and this is how she built her work, by starting from cultural aspects or immaterial knowledge, and then she built her performances without having references in the art field. Another important figure for me is Marvin Weldon. You may know this painter. He's Dutch and lived in Geneva. He died at the age of 90 in Geneva. And I really like him because he's a very emancipated painter. He used a lot of different mediums, and that's very interesting because at the time when in Switzerland you had a lot of art concret, he was very much into abstract expressionism, and so knowing his work helped me to develop mine as well as a student, and also nowadays. Another reference that I would like to give to you is Superstudio and all the architecture from the 70s in Italy, because they kind of had a vision of an emancipated society in which forms are creating new possibilities. And somehow I pay a lot of attention to architecture, and Superstudio is one of the group that I appreciate the more. Finally, I would like also to mention Christo and Jean-Claude, because it's really rare to see in the art world a couple of artists that are able to work together. Jean-Claude originally is not an artist, but she was in an artistic family. And Christo is a model for me somehow, because he came from Bulgaria to Geneva, and then from Geneva to Paris. There he met Jean-Claude. Then he went back to Rome, and then back to Paris. They married, had a child, then they left for New York. And generally speaking, they worked until 2009 or 11 when she died, always together. And this gives me a lot of motivation when I see the videos of the conception of their projects. It's something very inspiring, and there is really a few people that have such an energy. The last picture is Tarkovsky. It's a bit strange to show this cinematographer, but he reveals his own influences and references. So he's quoting the cineasts from his time, like Antonioni or Wenders. He's also very much interested in older Russian filmmaker. For me, Tarkovsky has something to do with poetry, and it's a big reference, but I really like the aspect that he brings to cinematography. And most of the videos I'm doing are going in this direction. So I would like to end with this image from Solaris, and mention the fact that Anne asked me this question about Swiss Art Awards and the references. And I think that the most important thing is when you reach the age of Christo or or Bram van Velde, and then you can say you made it, not when you get only one prize. Voilà.
Thank you, Nelly. That's a great presentation. I would like to join her to continue with the discussion, actually, and to get in deep into the questions, maybe mediate a little bit more about her work. As mentioned, and as Nelly mentioned earlier, we met, I think, even 12 years ago. Actually, not 10. So time passed by quickly. And yeah, I mean, actually, Nelly has been very inspiring since the very beginning of our friendship, originally in Geneva. A part of her talented aspect, she's also a very kind human. She was this girl who was translating me when I was learning French in the school, and I was like, what's that, like, in the course of my favorite teacher was Yvonne Manfrini. Manfrini, if you are seeing us, bonjour. Yeah, so yeah, and Nelly was this girl that I can always ask her, like, what the hell is she saying, and so on. And it took quite some years to learn French, and yeah, we did it. So yeah, Nelly, I like to ask you. I like to ask you about the very first image you show, Random Memory, from 2016. I can see your influences from modernist painters, and I'm very triggered about how do you jump into working with patterns and repetitions to doing a film essay with video and 16 millimeters film. How that happened, like, you know?
So, well, this is a question I'm trained to answer, actually. I would say that are like two horses. One will be painting that goes on one rhythm and needs to be fed every day, and the other one is a fast and difficult to manage horse. And so the painting economy or the painting rhythm and the one that leads to video are very different. When one of the horses is tired, then the other one can start again. And this is how I function. I pass from one to the other. So one is nourishing the other. And for painting, I studied with Peter Roesch. So he trained me to really work and produce a lot of canvas, let's say, or work on an extended way. And for the video aspect, I made a master, and there, after discovering the work of Tacida Din, for example, or Ben Russell, Ben Rivers, I realized that artists are also using 16 millimeter or 35 millimeters, and I was really curious to work with that. As my generation is not using this medium anymore, I was willing to experiment the limits and the pictoriality of these images.
Yeah, for example, if I can ask you, what will be the main worries of your work as a subject? How will you describe what are the subjects you deal with, in not in terms of format, but in terms of worries? If I can say that, like, what are your worries in your work, like as a subject? What are the worries you work in the medias you use? I mean, when you show a size, of course, the content and it's different. But what is the main intentionality and motivation when you are producing an artwork?
I would say my intention is to bring the viewer some kind of experience. One thing that is very important for me is to create an environment in an exhibition. So you will enter and there will be sound, there will be movement, there will be different images set differently. I always start with an intention. This is the main question. Now, for what are the most important questions? I think till now they were very formal, and I think since this year I decided to go in another direction, which is also to ask questions that are more real, maybe, like what about sustainability, how to have a long-term production, not only one project, then another one, how to build an architecture for many years. And yeah, finally, it's hard for me to say this, but we also need to consider the questions of ecology. So even if it doesn't appear in the work till now, I think in the future I have to deal with that as well, because it's evident nowadays, as well, like questions of gender that are now very important.
Yeah, that's true. It's like definitely something gradually we learn to integrate these worries and concerns into work. You can you tell us how was your experience in the residences? You had like several residences that were absolutely relevant for your work production. Let's say Champ d'Amour would haven't been exist if you didn't the exhibition at the Palais d'Athénée in Geneva, and if you didn't were at the Rome Institute, you wouldn't have showed this solo show at the Palais d'Athénée, and so on. Can you tell us about how has been your experience, for example, working at the Villa Adriana with the film, or in general, if you want to point in order, like your three most relevant residencies, like the Rome Institute and the project with Lux in Peru. I mean, how does actually all this leads you to produce? And can you please tell us from intimate perspective why it's so relevant to produce in a context in which you have institutional support and absolute freedom, like carte blanche, the infamous carte blanche?
So I don't know if you're aware with the system of residencies in the art field. Should I explain it from the ground, or would you like?
Well, I guess there are several models.
Well,
actually,
exactly.
I think in general Swiss models, it also depends by canton and by institutions. So, but for artists, it's very necessary to have institutional support, money for production, technical assistance, and the money, of course, for producing. And this is, I mean, otherwise you cannot produce. And so my question, just like then you can just share us how this influence your work. Yeah, then I'd like to direct more the question how this actually led you to produce works, and in a chain of consequences till you were able to produce the project Un Champ d'Amour, for example.
Right.
So just like how is it for you? Like how has been? Let's point in the three experiences. I mean, you have more, but let's focus in how it was working with curator Lux in Peru, how it was the résidence de Centre Culturel Suisse in Paris, and the Swiss Institute of Rome. I mean, that's enough already to talk about. Yeah.
Ouais. Ouais. So Harm Lux is, for example, the first project in Quito and Lima was the idea that European artists needs to be confronted to the Latin American paradigm. And so there are few curators who dare to do this bridge between Europe and Latin America, because the view on art is very different, plus the distance and the communication is also difficult.
Budget.
Budget as well. Well, we had some budget to do that, but the idea was to combine the work from a European person, a Swiss artist, for example, and a Latin American one. So we made duo work, which made the work, for of course, more difficult because you have to deal with compromises. But it's also very interesting because for me this was the moment when I started to introduce sound and movement in my work, because I had to do with an artist who is called Patricio Dalgo. This led me to the idea of discovering sound and movement, which seems strange, but from the point of view of a painter, you're used to have two-dimensional images that stay still on the wall. So once you're confronted to that, it changes totally the way you're producing an exhibition. And working with Harm Lux was also very important because he's really taking risks in order to serve the ideas of the artists. So we did a series of performances inside of Quito, inside of the city, and it's a very difficult space because of the movement, because of the attention. It's very hard to keep the attention of the public. And also in Lima, we had the chance to encounter the Peruvian art scene, which is something that seems very banal, but actually it is a totally different world. And once you discover this, you come back in Switzerland and you have another point of view. And it's when you do a residency, it's never like going on holidays. You have to ask yourself the question of what are the necessary tools to produce my work outside from the studio, outside from my country. And when I had to leave for a residency, it could be in Paris, Rome, or Peru, the question was, do I take only my computer or do I need more? Once you arrive there, you realize that your artistic practice is not about the computer, it's about the friends, it's about the community that holds your work. It's also about your favorite bar or your habits, your rhythm of life that changes radically. So for Paris, it was a completely different rhythm, and I was very glad to be in the Swiss Foundation of the Centre Culturel Suisse, because there is no residency there, but the Fondation Suisse, it's linked, but it's two different institutions. And there I realized that Switzerland needs to be fed by the influence of France and also from other countries, but we cannot like stay only in one city and be happy with the cultural way. Exactly, we cannot be isolated. And Paris is the perfect playground to have a transdisciplinary approach toward arts, because they manage to combine design, architecture, fashion, and photography and visual arts. The bounds between the different disciplines are likely more to be open than to be closed, like in Geneva or in other countries. Regarding Rome, it's another paradigm, because Rome has the goal to promote the Swiss innovation, the scientific innovation, and the artistic research in Italy. It's very important because the two countries are neighbors, and despite this, the Italian art scene doesn't know very well what we are doing in Switzerland, and we don't know as well what they are doing. For instance, when I was there, I thought, okay, I know arte povera, but actually I discovered a lot of more works that I had no access to while being in Switzerland. So being in the country, being in Rome was particularly important, because also it's Rome that has instaured this model since 300 years of residencies, because they first had the Villa Medici, and sent the students from the Art Academy in Paris there to study and discover the culture of Renaissance. And afterwards, all the countries in Europe decided to create this residency system. So this is how residencies became popular, thanks to France.
Yeah, I hope you also say hello to Pistoletto then. No? Yeah. So to continue, so actually, let's say works, or at least your list of works, would have been possible without like all this structure of support from the not only the Swiss art institutions, but also the collaborations of institutions abroad. Otherwise, let's say the experience of acknowledging own references and context gets limited by your local references. So I guess it's very relevant for your work, at least, that has been during these residency periods, you have been able to produce works that eventually will lead you to presenting in another institution, right?
Yes, definitely. I encourage artists to experience residencies abroad, and because this is a reset for the practice, but also the residencies are helpful because each time you're confronted to a new public, and therefore the dialogue with the public nourishes the work. So it's very relevant to go abroad. And the Swiss Institute, for example, supported me to be able to make the last video project that I'm working on now. Maybe I will show it as a conclusion, which is the video that you mentioned about the Villa Adriana, which is an archaeological site close to the city of Rome, and that I went to film in 2017, also with 16mm. And this is the project that I will show next in Geneva, probably. If you...
Is the work under construction? It's like the upcoming project.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you mention just quickly what is the dynamic of, for example, not having a representative gallery that is like representing your work, but that you're like constantly looking for funding or doing applications, residencies? Can you just give us just a glimpse of how is your experience about as an independent artist working continuously, applying for contests, residencies, just how is it for you? Or what could you tell us about?
I don't have a constant dialogue with one person, so this leads me to work with multiple institutions. On one hand, the gallery really helps young artists to structure their work. But on the other hand, not having a gallery also allows me to show what I want, where I want, to borrow works, to manipulate all my production how I want. So on one hand, it's good to work alone, but on the other hand, it's also good to have the support of a gallery that leads the work further also. Voilà. And the research for budget makes us very autonomous. So when you have to generate the budget for a project, you will need to make this effort of sending dossiers, of making production dossiers, especially for video. It's a very long process, and it takes like half of the time for the work. Voilà.
Yeah, thanks for your comment. So I'd like to ask you a couple of more questions before opening the questions. And if you'd like to share us also the latest upcoming work. But I articulated already the question. Can you tell us, how did you articulate this work, Un Chant d'Amour? What is your relation with Jean Genet, and what is all this about?
Here, the day when I installed the piece in Basel, I was really tired, and at the end I thought, what can I tell tomorrow to the people? And I woke up the next day, and I had in mind a quote by Lacan. I will tell it in French. C'est je dis toujours la vérité, pas toute, parce que toute la dire, on n'y arrive pas. Les mots y manquent, c'est même par cet impossible que la vérité tient du réel. So I always say the truth, not all the truth, because to tell it entirely is something we never achieve. Words are missing. It's even this impossible that makes the reality real, the truth real. So I would say for this work, it's a very instinctive work. It's a sensation that it's about the limit of language. Basically, in Un Chant d'Amour, I was really touched by this moment when the two prisoners are trying to communicate, and they only have one cigarette, and one of them is using a little straw to share the smoke from his cigarette to his neighbor. And this is the only way that they have to speak to each other. And therefore, this piece is about the impossibility to communicate. Voilà.
Do you want to show us like the upcoming project before we start with like open and moderate questions?
Villa Adriana. Voilà.
Which one is this one?
This has no sound. It's video, voilà, in 16 millimeter.
So this is a film essay that was shown at the Villa Adriana in Rome during the residence at the Swiss Institute in Rome. What is it? This 16 millimeters? Is it a digital video? What is this?
So it's 16 millimeter. What we did now with the cinematographer Benjamin Dobo is that we used the mirror in front of the camera, in front of the lens, in order to double this image. This is a direct reference to Caravaggio, the Narcissus, the painting where you have the reflection of the protagonist in the water. And this image here is the Teatro Centrale de Tivoli. Sorry, we passed the image. These are the first image of rebuilt pieces. Here you can see part of the columns are made of concrete and some other parts are the original ones. And I really like the aspect of having something real and something restored. Here, the story of the Villa Adriana is about Antinous, who is the lover of Adrian the Emperor. And Antinous dies in the river Nile. And here we worked with an actor from Zurich, who is now presenting or incarnating the souvenir of Antinous. So I'll play it again. Voilà.
And how long is this video?
This is gonna be also 12-15 minutes, but this time with an actor and with sound. So it's the first time there is a person inside of the video. Voilà. So here you can see the use of 16 millimeter is visible in the light. The image is not retouched, so there is no color correction on this version. It's only a working video. Voilà. And I'm very glad I could film this site because I was very interested in this place since 7 years. And finally in 2017 I got the authorization to film on the archaeological site.
20 years waiting for authorization. That's great.
So thank you for your attention, for watching all these videos without sound.
Thank you, Nelly. It's a pleasure to learn all about your latest work. Before starting opening the forum, I'd like to make you very last question. When you quote Lacan about the impossibility to communicate, will you relate your work has a reflective form of the impossibility to communicate? In a like there is always this subjectivity when communicating. Will you say that your work actually evokes the inconstant and the human inability to actually have a concrete but often subjective question? Like in other words, will you describe, just to give a latest statement about your work, in another paraphrasing that is not the Lacan quoting, is it communication and fiction? Is it a subjective, or is it like a Woody Allen say, like a art is not a telegram, there's nothing to communicate, or just latest statement about your quote?
When we started this idea of presenting my work, Anne also asked me about unrealized project, and I had in mind the sentence by Robert Filliou, that something made and something undone is the same. So voilà. Here we have another work that started on its own. This is in Rome, but it's another subject, another performance. Maybe we can finish with that work. I forgot to show it to you before. It's in a parking place in Rome, where they used to organize exhibitions in the 70s, and together with Leo Hoffmann, who is the other performer that is here, we decided to reenact all the performances that did the artists in the 70s. So we couldn't do that because we didn't even have the authorization to do an artistic project there. In Rome, it's very difficult.
Which one are you reenacting in this one?
In this one, we are just projecting the names of every artist that participated to the exhibition in the 70s. It's interesting to remind this show because this is the moment when Rome was very important on an international level. They used to have Beuys, Boetti, all the American artists, Solly Witt, living there. And nowadays, the attention is more towards the United States or Paris, London. But that in 73, 74, Rome was very important. So here you see the parking de la Villa Borghese, where you have a very interesting acoustic. Voilà, this is the acoustic, because there are sound mirrors on top of the...
Serra, Neumann, Paolini, Luti, the Dominicis, Pisani, Gilbert and George, Aconci, Proteus, Cornelis, Boyes, Simonetti, Postel, Chiari, Watts, Spöri, Fini, Gautier, Brecht, Mathieu Mas, Whitman, Capro, Pistoletto, Richter, Rosenquist, Oldenburg, Hamilton, Segal, Liechtenstein, Warhol, Testa, Schifano, Tanguy, Armand, Dine, Twombly, Coachella, Journalist, Roesch, Postel, Chiari, Watts, Spöri, Filliou, Gautier, Brecht, Massinas, Whitman, Capro, Pistoletto, Richter, Rosenquist, Oldenburg, Hamilton, Segal, Liechtenstein, Warhol, Testa, Schifano, Tanguy, Armand, Dine, Twombly, Rotella, Johnson, Rauschenberg. Toto,
Alors,
Opalka,
on va faire la dernière
Palermo,
question.
Gu-
Okay, so just to get a recapitulation of your work, I have the impression your work it's very based in art history, like it's a recapitulation or auto constant references of what are the main subjects in the art history construction. What is your position from considering today the colonial theory, the colonial positions that criticize art history is misogynist, excluent, and Eurocentric? For example, I mean, it's a hard question, but in other words, let's say when we study art, we of course study European art, and we study only like the representative from the most colonialist five countries, and we study French philosophy, we study German philosophy, and so on. And of course, when we study history, everything else is folk or it's ethnic studies, and woman is often unrepresented and so on. And it's just I like to just have your perception about how do you deal with this constant, let's say, pressure about how art has to be references, and when you constantly reference to establish historical frames, how do you integrate the frames that we have today that are not only the conventional art history, but that also includes other narratives, other philosophies, and other perspectives? It's hard, I know, but I like to like if you like to share us just a perception about. It's very complex. I also consider it very complex because I as well study, of course, in a European institution, and then it was a constant question I had. Yeah.
Right. Regarding the post-colonial question,
Decolonial.
decolonial. Well, I would like to divide it in two questions or two answers. First, I'm very interested in the work of Frantz Fanon because he, with his text, made possible the understanding from the European-wide view on different positions, like for example René Green's position as an artist that is really treating this. And this was for me, their work was for me an answer or a key to understand better this decolonialization question. For the question of ladies in the art, I would like to say that I refer to two models. I kind of often think about the work of Etel Adnan, who was a poet, and he's still a poet, and she had the success to be a good painter as well, and her work was really recognized at the end of her career. So now she's 90 something, and Hans Ulrich Obrist is looking at her work. Sorry, this is another thing. Voilà. Looking at Etel Adnan's work gave me a lot of energy because I really thought if she made it, it's possible to do it as a woman, and it's also possible to have a long career and work. I also think now about Marcia Afif, which is really a reference for me. She not only did a lot of paintings that are very radical, but she also used to write in art forum in the 70s, and in a very simple way on painting, very, very radical. Their position as women in the art field shows that it's possible to act and do whatever you want. It's only a matter of persistence. Voilà. And so I wanted also to show you maybe another work, the one that I forgot to show you in the beginning. This is in the desert in Lima, and here this is the work I did with the video artist and sound artist Patricio Dalgo. So here is an attempt also to break this boundary of the post-colonial question.
I asked decolonial, but
the
it's okay.
decolonial question. No, because they're very influenced by the European paradigm. they are studying references like Rembrandt and Caravaggio. And for me, it was a discovery because by going in Lima and in Ecuador, I really thought, okay, they will have other references. But the fact they had European references as well was showing to me that really the European Western paradigm went everywhere. And so 30 years ago or even before, it's not new.
Science colonization.
Voilà.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah,
We'll
we're
see
at
in
time.
the future.
We're at time. It's a great work. This work was produced in Peru. Yeah, so just articulating maybe one of my latest questions to open when we're in time. Yeah, sorry I make so much question, but I had to. I'm a curious person. No, actually, it's very complex, Nelly. I'm sorry, I don't want to make you struggle. Actually, it's a constant question we have, today. Talking about the coloniality means to talk from outside of the Eurocentric notions of production and references. And since your work is very fundamental in European standards, I had to make it. I felt obligated to make it. I think it's a very inspiring. Also, it gives certain approach. I hope you have in the future more experiences. Hope you take you also abroad also to continue looking for other contexts and references. This talk is being retransmitted in Guatemala City. In Guatemala City, curator Just Pinto is very interested in the European work because, of course, colonized countries are studying also art history, but are struggling a lot to have their own art history, the colonial perspective, which means non-copy-paste model from European standards. And they probably will bring these questions because, of course, we study European questions, but from other latitudes, it's a complex subject, and it's a never-ending, as feminism, it's a never-ending subject that has to be continuously discussed. And with this, I want to thank you very much, Nelly, for accepting this invitation, for sharing with us this special, very special, intimate edition of the Textile Werkbereich, but also special because I also share a lot of affection for her, I will say. I had to say it. She's a very inspiring woman, and I'm really looking forward to following her future projects. Very inspiring, and congratulate her to have won the most important prize, actually, in Switzerland. As you know, or if you didn't know, she won the Swiss Art Award, which is the most relevant art prize in Switzerland. And I want to say that for that, we feel like you will bring further questions into art and bring, let's say, to the established and to the institutional questions that are really from the ground, let's say, from the ground that we need to discuss, and hopefully the colonial also. So thank you very much, Nelly. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne.
Yes.
Thanks.
So I like to moderate questions. I hope you have questions, because otherwise I will continue making questions. And there are many unspoken things. She has been working for quite so long, so it's not in 1 hour we cannot cover all the works, details, process, concepts, and strategies that artists use in building aesthetic solutions. It's a long career, and there is still a lot of things that are not shown, but I will be very triggered to listen your questions. So if you had any question, please don't be shy. You have a question? Thank you.
Okay. I have a question about something about the mindset of your work. I see a lot of free-flowing movement, like expressionistic desire to communicate between the lines of your work. It's kind of hard to express because like art isn't that it isn't a straight road. It's but that desire to communicate, like illustrating the borders, like between languages and different cultures, is it like a process you wish to express, like like you told at the beginning, you start out with more of an emotion than an idea. Like you start out with basically thoughts, and you choose your way from then, like choice of media and things. And are those desires to show how should I put it? It's not that easy. Your it's like I'm sorry. I'm fishing for words here. But it's your desire to express like these social issues, and is it something that comes that comes like when you're doing the work? Like is it something that that is like on your mind all the time, or is it something you want to express like visibly, something to understand, or do you like to be more diffuse about it? It's hope you'll understand.
Well, I see. There are two types of work that you have seen here. One of the works are very improvised. Clearly, they're coming from this free flow with a lot of freedom. Where my goal is to produce works that are done as if there was no effort, something like this. It's very direct. This is one thing. The other works are also conceptual. Some works are related to art history, as we mentioned before, to previous exhibitions, to one artist in particular. Like, for example, the arrows, they are related to post-rest energy, a performance by Marina Abramovic. And therefore, there is this attempt to react or to the art history, but also to events in the outside world. So, yes. I don't know.
Yeah, I also understood the question as the motivations or the intentionality.
More the motivations. More the motivations. You mean one motivation for me is to bring the viewer a feeling, a visual energy, or a contemplative state of mind. And so I will do most of the time the works out of my own desires, but it's also with taking in consideration the viewer or the public in an exhibition. So it's a balance between all these things that you mentioned. It's very hard to answer. Yes.
Yeah, I guess it's a very individual, like almost a religious thing, you know, about how each one experiments spiritualities. I guess it's the same when producing art. It's a very independent approach of how one develops concepts and the motivations that originate the intention of your work. It's like absolutely personal, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sometimes it can be also out of sadness or out of happiness. There is a work out of sadness made in Louvre, for example, that is clearly sad. Or there is also works that are made out of the feeling of freedom. And yeah, it's a bit simple to tell this, but Anna is right. It's a very intimate thing. It's hard to describe. Voilà. Any other questions?
Thank you.
So one of the topics you said in the beginning is inaccessibility.
Yes.
And so I wonder, you know, when you put the sand there or the doors, and so how would you react if people really try to challenge you on that? So they take the sand away or they try to break through the doors.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think this is an insult on your work, or would you enjoy that, you know, as a, let's say, interaction? And so how would you see that?
I will enjoy it. Yeah.
That's a great question, actually. Yeah.
What? Mm-hmm. No, because as you saw in the video before, when I walk in the museum, I'm touching the artworks. So I kind of find it sad when the artworks are too idolâtrés, comment on dit? How do you say?
Idealize it or
Idealized and too protected. I don't want that the artworks become something holy. It's not. Even the most expensive artworks, old artworks, for me, it's we should have a direct access. So no, I wouldn't mind if people interact or change or destroy the work. For example, in the sand pieces that you've seen maybe in the beginning, I did not explain very much about them, but a lot of them got destroyed in exhibitions, and voilà, that's the life of the work.
I also understood your question about the quoting that gives a lot to discuss about or to reflect about, that misunderstanding, miscommunication of language, but also we can relate it often to art. Like today, we all know contemporary art, conceptual art needs a lot of mediation often to contextualize, because it's often auto-referencing history. And of course, when you're not like you didn't study fine arts and so on, maybe you don't know who is this and that. Yeah. So I think your question, if I understand, I also understand in that sense, and I also like to extend the questions about yeah, or let's say requote again Woody Allen saying that art is not about communicating. It's not a telegram. It doesn't mean to communicate, but it means to reflect or produce reflection, I guess.
Right. No, it's more about reflection.
Yes. Thank you. So more
Please,
questions?
one last
Thank you.
question. What?
Hi, I have to say that I really enjoyed your exhibition. We have talked a lot about the pre-production, a little bit about the production itself. So I would like to know, also especially in this last work that you were showing, that it was shown first, I think if I remember right, in Paris and after in Basel, how it changed from the initial setup to the final view, where you incorporated or you did not allow the pass of the people visiting it, for example. So when after you create something, you get satisfied with it, when do you think that now it? Yes, exactly. But because you were also mentioning before the made and made. So when do you get yourself satisfied or say, now it is complete, now this goes? And then how, once that you define this, how do you recreate it, like in the case that we have seen on the, let's say, new setup that you did in Basel?
Right. I really like this question because it's about satisfaction. Also getting to the point where you can say it's finished or I can reproduce it. In a way, with that installation, in transferring one installation from one space to another changes the function of it. It will be always different, even for a painting. You change the set, you change the environment, it will be another work. So in this transfer, I think there is the piece changed completely. In the first version, it was only a wall inside of the space in which you could access from both sides. On the other version, it was completely closed, and this was very difficult for the public in a way, because we are not allowed to have a restricted access to the space. Of Art Basel, the idea is to go to see pieces. So when you close the access to something to be seen, it's very frustrating. And so I appreciated to have this sensation for myself, to not be able anymore to touch to the artwork. Plus, it is so heavy that it's impossible to move it, and very difficult to destroy as well. And with painting, I found a very good way to know when I'm happy, when it's finished, when it's done. And this is something very instinctive. When the composition is finished, then I know it. It's simply not more. And I would say, yeah, it's possible to take a piece and recreate it in another space, but it will never be the same. And I do it until I'm really, really satisfied. And in this case, I was happy in the Swiss Art Awards more than in the first version. But the first version was necessary to build the second one. and we come back to the idea of repetition. Voilà. Is that a good answer?
Is there a bad answer?
No.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. This is a very good question. It's actually talks about art that's made in a context and cannot exclude itself from the space. It's like you need space for make whatever you do. You had an idea and it has to be developed in a text, in a context. I think Isabella, which is also a colleague from us, we also studied together in Geneva, likes to make a question, please.
I wanted to ask more about what you told about sustainability. Like, what does it mean for you today, and what could it mean for you in the future? Or also, I felt like you were working also when you talked about now. You talked about time, about your practice now, but also always you were looking into the future, that you would have to have a long practice on these questions of being sustainable in your work, resources. Yes.
Yeah. I think this is a question that was also present in the previous presentation from the curator. I wake up and I ask myself this question every day, so I don't have the answer right now. But I think it's a matter of community. We as artists, we are working a lot on a individualist base, and I wish it will be possible to generate a powerful community that will help or support, or I don't know. I really don't have the answer for this question, but it's something that matters to me. Voilà.
Isabella, thank you so much for such a value question. Actually, it's from the list, you know, of hopefully, it's like a to-do list of things that we actually had to take care. Us who were forming European institutions and educations, we were not firm about putting in practice sustainability, decoloniality, and feminism. Maybe in theory, maybe we have check out some subjects around, but putting in practice, it's quite a statement that our generation really had to take in consideration, and not from a moral position, but from the political position of do things politically. And yeah, I think it's a very relevant question, and we don't know yet how to slowly actually make it a concrete, in concrete possible, that we can be more like a have a practice that is also social responsible in historical terms, in reference and so on. Yeah. But at least, let's say for a beginning, we are sensitive about and hoping to find somehow ways of dealing with it.
Last thing I would like to mention that tonight in Geneva, yesterday, there was a meeting organized by Rosa Brux, which is a collective that is asking these questions related to the artist salary, how we should pay the artist for his work. And also tonight there is the group Wages For, Wages Against that had a meeting in Geneva about these questions as well. So this is something that will move in the future in Switzerland. It started in New York, and hopefully we will have something also in Switzerland. So I would like to say hello to Geneva.
Yes, hello, bonjour Genève. Actually, it's a constant question that it doesn't come from New York, but it comes from all the unemploying artists that have 2 times jobs or 3 parts jobs and are actually struggling for producing their work and so on. And especially Swiss institutions has to actually bring in consideration education institutions have to take into their pensums what is the social status of the artist and what are their perspectives that are not limited to luxury producing in the context of market frames, which is with a gallery. So it is a subject we are dealing, I think, already from now, from a very small perspectives, and yeah, hopefully we don't die without having a retirement because we're artists or so on, yeah. But yeah, I'd like to quote again, actually our very first talk, Manuel, he gave us advice in real estate, among other perspectives he shows. But yeah, he also was talking about the social status of the artist and so on, about we don't have retirement and so on. And Matteo, last speaker, also tried, but he was also not able to actually in concrete show how actually you know, without being political, make your art or your subjects of research in a political way. And I quote, and I will quote again Jean-Luc Godard, like il faut pas faire de l'art politique, mais de faire de façon politique. So which means like, yeah, it's not about making political art, but making it in a political way. And with this, I guess it will be the motto for next works generation. So hopefully that we can engage more in a more sustainable approaches of producing without becoming a politicized artist. But yeah, and with this, if there is no more questions, or if there is a last question, thank you, Attila.
Yes, maybe I speak just like this. Oh, it's okay. Microphone is slightly strange, but it's okay. You go a lot around in the world. I mean, and people are reacting on you or on your art. And I think it must be a very special experience that with your work, which is in a certain context, I mean, you are reacting on a context, but as well the audience is then reacting on you. I mean, they are looking at your work, you presenting it, and you get maybe very different answers. So maybe in Lima, people are very happy and they are fascinated. In another country, maybe in Geneva, they look at it very critical or so. So this is my question. How is this experience maybe showing similar works and having very different reactions?
Yep. It's very, very sharp. You see the difference, yes. The way people criticize or appreciate the work is completely different from one background to the other. And for me, it was hard to adapt, also to understand what were the way they function in order to be able to, for example, Paris, they don't give so much attention to painting. They will give more attention, for example, in New York. In Rome, painting doesn't have also so much attention. So I will tend to present works that also are in dialogue with the context. And with the paintings in Rome, I tried to show them, but there is not so many reaction on the abstract paintings. In Switzerland, I have more reactions or more dialogue, to a better dialogue on painting than in the other countries, for example. And for the videos, it has been the same everywhere, basically. I did not feel a bigger difference. But the way people will judge the work is different, yes, and radically different. Voilà.
Thank you, Attila, for your kind question. It is a very relevant question that we were actually discussing. We spent the afternoon today talking about art, of course, among other subjects, and the subject of mediation and to go beyond established publics that are educated with the frame of historical or fine arts. This is about that, you know, that actually we're mentioning that. The reflections that art can bring us it doesn't belong to a bourgeoisie which is educated, but it's just like questions or just the effect of generating reflection that concerns every human being, which means culture, or fine arts, let's say, in other words, in general, culture, it's a subject that is relevant for every human being that is looking for reflection, that had existential question, had metaphysical question about any subject, and for this reason we need art, we need artists, we need creators or cultural producers that bring us this constant reflection. And I will say that there is a gap often in between what is the artist proposed meaningful subject to, you know, consolidate about, you know, their inner motivation, what he wants to motivate, like what he wants to transgress as communicating, because it's not his job to communicate but make reflection. And the perception of public, it's always other perception, but I guess that's the magic of it, not the misunderstanding as you quote earlier, but the ability to reflect, and that we don't get a conclusion of this is good or bad beyond moral neutralities or black and white. Just the fact of reflect, you know, that it brings you to question something. I guess this is the aim of producing. And I think when any work has produced that, whatever question it is, pleasant or unpleasant, then he has achieved his work as artwork, I guess. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you for your attention and questions as well. Hello. Finito.
Voilà, merci. Merci Nelly. I'd like to invite you to balcony. We have some nice drinks, very cheap actually. Subventioned by the